about 20 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock. Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. Now, the Minister of Finance, Colum Imbert, would have presented a $56.175 billion budget for fiscal 2022 to 2023 in Parliament on Monday under the theme Tenacity and Stability in the Face of Global Challenges. Now, several fiscal measures were announced, as well as increase in fuel and transport prices across the air bridge and sea bridge. Here to talk more about this is the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Brain Manning. Mr. Manning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Now.
Hi, good morning. Hope all is well. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. We're hearing you very clearly. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Mr. Manning, I have to tackle it. It is the hot button issue this morning, those fuel prices. Now, it may not have been a surprise to many of us because, of course, the minister would have announced capping that fuel subsidy at $1 billion. But a lot of people are wondering about the timing of the increase. We would have already experienced an increase this year, and then there's another increase at the pumps that we're going to experience from today. Was the timing the correct one, and how is the average citizen supposed to, deal with that increase in addition to other increases that's happening in the country?
I think one, you have to look at the entire budget in context. And you have to remember that as Trinidad and Tobago, we are price takers when it comes to oil and gas. This is a response by the government because of the increases in the prices of oil and gas internationally. It's not just because the government decided that we are going to, reduce the subsidy at the pump. You can talk to any economist, they will tell you that the fuel subsidy in terms of poverty alleviation is extremely inefficient. And that is because persons who drive bigger, more expensive vehicles with larger engines and who drive more often tend to benefit from the subsidy more than the people that the subsidy is supposed to assist, which are the poor. So the government has decided that if we continue with the subsidy as is, for the next few years with the projected international energy prices, we'll be paying $2 and $3 billion annually in fuel subsidy. And that's a significant amount of money for an inefficient tool that doesn't do exactly what it is we would like it to do, which is to alleviate poverty. And so it had to be reduced. But at the same time, that money can be better spent in other areas that actually alleviate poverty in Trinidad and Tobago. We increased the allowance of personal income tax to up to $7,500 monthly. We increased the VAT threshold from $600,000 to I believe $700,000 annually. We also have a one-time grant, a travel allowance for retired persons and other persons who would be on public assistance. So we are funneling that money that would have literally gone up in smoke in the fuel subsidy to the actual programs that are designed to protect and assist poor people in this country. And that's what the fuel subsidy was supposed to do in the first place, but it does not do that.
Right. Now, Mr. Manning, one of the things that would have been surprising, though, was that increase for travel in the air bridge and sea bridge. And a lot of people are wondering why the increase now. Is it that it was supposed to improve efficiency? I mean, now pensioners are going to have to pay when they use the sea bridge. So what was the reason for that increase at this time?
Again, it's the same issue. It's going to cost, the fuel prices internationally have gone up significantly. Also, you have to be reminded that our domestic air bridge travel is subsidized by our international travel. So that is already heavily subsidized. We don't pay the full price for using the air bridge in Trinidad and Tobago. The subsidy has been, there's a subsidy already there designed to assist persons in this country. And the government recently spent close to $1 billion for those two vessels to travel between between Trinidad and Tobago. And that was a significant expenditure. And still, no one in Trinidad and Tobago has to pay full price to travel between Trinidad and Tobago. And that cost has to be carried by the state.
So now that we're seeing the cost that has to be carried by the state, is it that we're going to be seeing improved efficiency? For example, are we going to be seeing CAL adding more flights to travel between both islands?
More flights would mean higher costs. What we want to do is have more efficient flights between the islands, and that there aren't any empty seats to ensure that they're always on time. So CAL is doing its best in terms of operational standpoint, but every single flight between Trinidad and Tobago is subsidized by the rest of CAL. And that's something that we have to keep in mind.
Right. Now, the 4.3% that was given to Tobago, a huge chunk of it was actually given to recurrent expenditure, while only 300 million, in addition to some of the loan facilities, was allocated towards the development of the island. What was the thinking behind this?
Yeah, so Tobago received a significant chunk of the national budget. They received more than they received last year, but you have to also remember that various ministries have allocations for expenditure in Tobago. So say the Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Works and Transport, Ministry of Local Government, and so on. They still receive an allocation to conduct work in Tobago. So the expenditure in Tobago is going to be significantly more than the actual allocation in Tobago. There's also foreign direct investment taking place right now with the construction of several hotels in Tobago. So there's a lot happening in Tobago that will stimulate that economy. It's not just the allocation that's coming directly to the THA.
Mm. Now, in terms of the concessions, there was an announcement that there's going to be concessions for small and medium businesses, which include a $500 million long-term loan guarantee for up to 80% of the value. Now, honestly, Minister, this seems like something that we have heard before in terms of how the government wants to help those small and medium companies. What is different this time around? You've heard it before because it's been working. So we're expanding that program to really give more opportunity to small and medium enterprises in Tobago so that they can access these loans for further growth. Tobago is scheduled for several infrastructural projects, one including a marina so that it can become a hub for the yachting industry in the region. People talk a lot about diversification, and one of the important points of diversification is that it has to occur along the lines of competitive advantages. You cannot become a leader in an industry in which you have no competitive advantages. And one of Tobago's greatest competitive advantages relative to our CARICOM neighbors is its location outside of the hurricane belt. So that's what makes it really, it gives it a great opportunity for the hotels that you're seeing being built now, and also to become a regional leader in the yachting industry. And that's why marina is also being built in Tobago. So there's a lot happening in Tobago, and I believe it's going to benefit many of the small and medium enterprises in Tobago, and there's huge growth expected in our sister. Right. Now, I love that you mentioned the diversification, because the minister also announced that even though the non-oil sector contributed 50% of GDP, the oil and gas sector will remain a cornerstone of the economy for years to come. So why are we talking diversification if we're still holding on to that non-renewable sector, the oil and gas that we have grown so accustomed to? Yeah, as I said earlier, diversification and economic growth is built along the lines of competitive advantage. For example, Tobago couldn't decide tomorrow that they're going to become the #1 strawberry grower in the world, right? Because they don't have the land space, they don't have the climate for growing strawberries. Trinidad and Tobago, whether we like it or not, is an energy economy. It is one of the things that in which we have competitive advantage. Moving away too far from the oil and gas sector is like asking Shaquille O'Neal to shoot three-point shots, right? He's 7 feet, 300 pounds. You want him to play close to the basket because that's where his advantage is. He cannot be stopped from there. On the three-point line, he's easy to guard. Also, there was a lot of growth in the non-energy sector. Also, it's up to about 50% of our total economy, and that's extremely heartening. Trinidad and Tobago remains the #1 manufacturing economy in the entire region. So we are seeing diversification. There's the Phoenix Park project, which has also come on stream. Also, I think something that was missed in the budget is the development of a plastics or polyolefins industry, where we are going to be producing, I believe it's polyethylene and polypropylene. Polyethylene may be the most used plastic in the world. There's low density polyethylene, high density polyethylene, and polypropylene is a clear plastic used for packaging. So you see that with a lot of the clear plastics that you would use for bottling or for packaging food and so on. So there's a lot of opportunity. We have set the stage for growth in various industries, and we are very happy that we are seeing a growth in the non-energy sector, because that's exactly the kind of planning that we have put into place, and we expect to see this growth at this point in time, even after coming out of the maybe greatest economic downturn in the last 100 years, which was the COVID pandemic. Right. Now, as we switch gears to property tax to me is another one of the conversations that we've been hearing for a long time in terms of the government is going to start, start receiving rather that property tax. How possible is it going to be in 2023? How soon are we going to move away from the conversation and actually implement it for those who have properties?
Yes, well, the Minister of Finance is committed to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that property taxes will be implemented in 2023. It's something that has to be done. The greatest feature of the property tax is it underpins the reform of local government. It ensures that funding raised within various burgesses and communities can be used within those communities, whether for drainage, roadworks, and for other local government issues. It's something that is much needed. We used to have a land and property tax previously that was repealed, and since then we've been trying to re-implement a system that is fair, one that's equitable, and one that makes sense. Of course, the opposition has been trying to stymie the whole thing in the court system at one point, and there's also been other delays. But it will happen, and it will be a fair tax, and it is a welcome tax to communities, much like in San Fernando East that are highly residential. Those taxes collected can now be used within the community. There won't be complaints of not enough funding in various burgesses around the country because they have to wait on central government to send funding for various local government activities. Now funds will be raised and used within the communities in which they were raised, which is beneficial and equitable to all involved.
Right. Now, the minister would have announced at the spotlight that we are receiving that windfall, right, as a result of the crisis that's taking place in UK and Russia. But a lot of people are... But a lot of people have been cautioning, I would say, the Minister of Finance not to be too optimistic because they do anticipate some recessions next year or at least in the second quarter. Do you anticipate those recessions happening? And then how do you think the government is going to sort of try to balance exactly their spending to ensure that we don't have a need for that sort of money as we look towards the second quarter?
Yeah, well, of course, in any sensible person, if you come into a windfall, you don't just go crazy and start spending all your money because you're not sure what's going to happen tomorrow. So we are an extremely fortunate country, and I would say we were extremely wise. In fact, we have developed several buffers, excuse me, against fluctuation in international energy prices, one of which is the HSF. Another, we have our foreign reserves, which I believe are up to now about 8.5 months of import cover. So our economic buffers are in place. The numbers that we use for our predicted oil and gas prices going forward came from the international agencies, and we feel pretty confident that budget, even though it was we focused expenditure on really expansion of our economy, it is also a sensible budget. It is also why with the wage negotiations, we've decided to make the offer that we did, because we understand how much money we have now. We are not certain as to what money we will have in the future. And that is why we could not have paid or offered public servants more than we have offered thus far. And we wanted to be conservative and sensible in what we're doing. We didn't want to commit to huge amounts of payment going forward. And we're not sure exactly what our revenues will look like going forward. We didn't want to come up with a permanent solution for what may be a temporary issue.
Right. Now, while the wage negotiations continue, and the Minister of Finance would have given, he would have given his word that if it is they accept the 4%, they will be paid in due course. A lot of people are wondering, how is it that we're going through these negotiations now, but the healthcare workers would have been given this huge chunk of the pie? Any sort of reasoning behind this? Of course, they would have been the first line responders during COVID, but how did the government, how were they able to find this money to give the healthcare workers while other public servants are also fighting for their due as well?
You have to remember the payment to healthcare workers for their valiant efforts during the COVID-19 pandemic would be a one-off payment. It's a one-off. If the commitment that we make to the public service would cost this country billions of dollars going forward in perpetuity. That's the huge difference. And that's why the discussion takes place and why the offer was made of 4%, because the CPO believes that this is a fair deal considering the economic situation that we find ourselves in and what we believe may happen going forward. There is a prediction that possibly there'll be a spike in energy prices later on in the year due to the winter months, because it tends to be a spike then. But then there's also the possibility of recession in the United States and also in the United Kingdom as they try to combat rising inflation in those economies. So we have to be cautious. We can't make promises that we can't keep and that will lead this country to economic ruin in case of any kind of energy price shock going forward.
And finally, Minister, in terms of the allocations, of course, we know the top three, they're usually education, national security and health. But I realized that housing was on the lower rung of the allocation for this budget. Any particular reason for that?
Yes, well, there are only so many houses that we can build at one point in time. And there's also restructuring taking place at the HDC in terms of completing some of the housing stock that is yet to be completed at the HDC and making sure that those houses are delivered to the citizenry and persons that have been waiting for housing for a long time. I believe the Minister of Finance said the housing list is now somewhere up to about 190,000 applicants, which makes it extremely difficult. But you have to consider that there are only so many houses that anyone can build within an annual period. If more is required within the HDC within the year, we will come back during the mid-year review and then approve more funding so that more houses can be offered to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But housing is extremely important. A lot of small contractors benefit from our housing program, and also the alleviation of the partial removal of the fuel subsidy also allows the funds that would have gone up in smoke in terms of burning fuel to be redirected to programs like this one, housing, local government, also infrastructural work, which add real revenue generating capacity to Trinidad and Tobago and also improve the lives of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So nice. Housing has received a significant funding from the Ministry of Finance, and if more is required, more will be provided at the mid-year review.
Of course. Well, Minister, I guess we will see you after the mid-year review. Thank you so much for joining us here and now and just sharing a little bit about what happened or what took place with the budget reading yesterday. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of the day. All the best, Trinidad and Tobago. Take care.
Of course, you too. And that was Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Brain Manning, just sharing a little bit about what occurred in the budget yesterday and how the allocations were divided. We have a short clip for you in terms of the allocations. Of course, the top three are always security, health, and education. Let's take a look at what the others are.
Finance for disbursement, the major fiscal 2023 allocations will be for education and training, $7.453 billion. For health, $6.892 billion. For national security, $5.798 billion. And this one, Madam Speaker, is something that people don't realize. For social grants in 2023, we will be spending $5.453 billion. Works and transport, $3.748 billion. Public utilities, $2.823 billion. Rural development and local government, $1.887 billion. Agriculture, $1.330 billion. Housing, $0.974 billion. Further, to create employment, drive development,